Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. We're here again with the Warriors of Chaos, going to be taking on the Empire, so let's get to the army compositions. I've got Alberto Largo here, the Big Bird here, Metal Shifting, Searing Doom, and Plague of Rust. In terms of the rest of the army composition, we've got a nice shield line here of Chaos Marauders, 2 Chosen, and the Mirror Guard. We've also got the Weird Spawn. 3 units of Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes to round things out, and of course the obligatory Summoners of Rage here. That's it for my build. Zooming on over to the Empire. He's got a front line of swordsmen and great swords here, a couple handgunners, one of which is the Silver Bullets. Karl Franz on foot, which is a pretty interesting pick. Of course, he has good AP and good combat stats, heavy armor, and still 65 charge bonus on foot. Holy cow. Looks like he's got Reikland Runefang, Galmaraz, and Stand Your Ground, as well as Hold the Line, which has been buffed to give +5 leadership, +4 leadership, +5 melee defense, instead of that silly charge, whatever it had before that was pointless. This actually helps a bit. I mean, +5 melee defense isn't amazing, but like on these great swords, for example, they're up to 35 melee defense, which is actually not too bad. He's also got 3 units of Demigryph Knights with halberds in the back, so a pretty narrow, straightforward Empire build. Pretty solid, though, all things considered. Let's go ahead and watch how things unfold. So you can see I'm going to be running up, doing a bit of Vanguard action with these Marauder Horsemen throwing axes. Since my opponent's content to sit here on the hill, I'm going to go ahead and take the initiative and try and harass a bit. We're going to run Big Bird forward, because if my opponent will shoot at Big Bird, then that'll be a nice distraction for the Marauder Horsemen. Of course, I wanted to point this out quickly. Big Bird, as a reminder, has 60% missile resistance as well as 25% magic resistance, so he'll be mitigating 60% of the handgunner fire, but the Silver Bullets in particular, because they do magic damage with their shots, he'll be mitigating, you know, the 60% plus the 25% of magic resistance, both of which do apply to the base damage. So yeah, you can see over here, handgunners reforming, now shooting at Big Bird there, so I'm perfectly happy about this. I'm going to now bring in my Marauders while the handgunners are busy shooting at Big Bird, start to pitch some axes at these very expensive Demigryph Knights. Obviously, the Halberd Demigryph Knights don't have a missile block chance, not that the Lance variants are any good, but you definitely want to bring the halberd variants. But yeah, they're going to take some throwing axes in the side here, and with a few volleys we'll be able to get maybe 1 or 2 unit models down there, so not too bad. This other unit in the back taking some volleys, and the handgunners now turning to fire at the Marauder Horsemen. We're going to have to pull them back or else take some shots ourselves. But I mean, obviously this is only 1,200 points here and 600 points here versus, you know, 1,500 and 1,500 respectively, so it's a pretty decent trade for me. You can see Big Bird throwing down Searing Doom there just to displace some of those handgunners. Did a tiny bit of HP damage, but nothing really substantial. The shield line is almost in place to begin the main melee engagement, so the skirmish phase will soon be done here. But you can see the Big Bird actually takes a decent amount of damage from the actual handgunners, but the Silver Bullets are just going to do next to nothing shooting at him. But yeah, you can see they're opening up shots on the Marauders. Probably want to focus fire either on the Mirror Guard or on the Chosen, but still getting some decent work done in that initial engagement. A little bit of sloppy micro by me here is going to get my Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes caught. There's a reason I don't use skirmish mode, because they would have just ran straight into the white line and then got caught and killed anyway. So I find that skirmish mode is oftentimes actually pretty buggy, which is why I don't usually use it. But Plague of Rust going down on those great swords who are matched up against the Mirror Guard, so the Mirror Guard will do a lot more damage to them. You can see they're down to only 35 armor base, so they're basically like Empire State troops right now in terms of their armor level. They'll definitely get cut through pretty bad by the Mirror Guard. And Big Bird, of course, dropping Stand Your Die, calling down another Searing Doom, that one not getting dodged by the handgunners there, and also dropping some good damage. A nice, ooh, I haven't seen that spell in a while. Which one's that? The Light Wizard going for a ride there, or sorry, the Life Wizard going for a ride there. Awakening of the Wood, had forgotten that one. But yeah, Demigryph Knights coming in, going to try and get on Big Bird here, but Big Bird has the mobility to be able to get through his own front line here, and so if I can zone through the Marauders here, actually looks like the Demigryph Knights going after the Chosen instead, or those are Chaos Marauders actually, but yeah, you can see this flank is getting rolled up a bit. My opponent's doing a pretty good job protecting his handgunners though. They're still on station, and the Greatswords honestly will do quite well against the Chosen for their cost. The Chosen do have very high melee defense, but you know, the anti-infantry bonus and armor piercing of the Greatswords does definitely help there. I think the Chosen will probably still win, but it may not be the most cost-effective trade. But obviously with Big Bird dropping Plague of Rust and where the Weird Spawn are also saturating Sundering Armor, you can see these Greatswords are down to only 5 armor, so they're going to be taking the majority of the damage done to them, you know, by the Weird Spawn and the Mirror Guard and everything else fighting here as well. You can see the Summoners of Rage kind of came in the late game here and just cleaning up these damaged units of Demigryph Knights, and because the units of Demigryph Knights have already taken quite a bit of damage, you know, from the Marauder Horsemen and things, the Summoners of Rage are able to clean them up pretty well, although some effective handgunner fire also coming down, doing some really nice damage to the Summoners there. My opponent's handgunner play was definitely on point, other than shooting at Big Bird, of course, which is a definite waste, but yeah, the front line's crumbling. You can see the Chosen are pushing through into the back line, and there's just not enough to protect the handgunners at this point. You got the Chaos Marauders also coming in here, the Marauder Horsemen, that is. Karl Franz looks like he's got interesting Flesh to Stone. Don't see that get used too often, but he's up to 160 armor. Honestly, probably should have been dumping that magic into raw healing instead with the Lore of Life. I mean, Awakening of the Wood can do some okay damage. It can also slow some troops down, has some utility in that way. Like, you know, if some Marauders are running in your backline, you can use that Awakening of the Wood to slow them down so you can catch them with something. But overall, I would say you definitely want to use your magic in healing, especially on the expensive units like Demigryph Knights. Even a Earthblood or two in the front line of those Greatswords could have definitely helped out. But at this point, it's just Karl Franz holding out on foot, getting monster mashed by Chaos Spawn and other things. And yeah, I mean, he'll be able to fight okay. Karl Franz actually has pretty good mass on foot. He's hard to knock over. But yeah, when he's surrounded like this, it's just not going to be enough at the end of the day, especially once that Jade Wizard goes. His leadership will falter. So yeah, just I did cast this one mostly because my opponent actually, in the post-battle chat, we were talking, and he was asking for some tips, and I told him, you know, then and there that obviously shooting Big Bird is a big mistake. I pointed out his missile resistance and magic resistance and so on, and I also said I would cast the game and offer up some tips so that if he ends up watching it, you know, I can give some feedback, because he definitely asked for it. So in terms of the army composition for my opponent, I would say it's probably a little bit narrow. You probably want a little bit more meat there. So what I would do is probably cut down one Demigryph Knight and try and bring more like Empire Knights instead. Chaos has a pretty good cav game with the Dragon Ogres and things like that, but you know, Empire Knights can definitely have a place in helping to zone out the Marauders, and they can do good damage, the Marauder Horsemen, that is. They can do good damage to the infantry Marauders on the charge. Even against something like Chosen, you know, if they get a solid rear charge, they can definitely pay for themselves there. So maybe finding a little bit of extra cost, like cutting some of those unnecessary spells on the Jade Wizard, like Flesh to Stone and Awakening of the Wood. I would cut those two, just bring Earthblood and Regrowth, especially if you're going to be bringing Karl Franz, which I don't disagree with the pick of Karl Franz there, especially on foot, because if I happen to bring Shaggoths as Chaos, then you know, your anti-large bonus isn't going to mean a whole lot against Karl Franz if he's on foot, obviously. But another option I would like to propose is actually the Archlector. If you take him on foot and use him to buff up your front line of greatswords, you can take him for only 1,000 points here, so you're saving a lot of funds in that way. I mean, granted, he doesn't do nearly as much damage in melee, but he is still pretty tanky, you know, 95 armor, 55 melee defense, not too bad, and his buffs are also very good. The Grand Shield of Faith, Grand Hammer of Sigmar. Against Chaos, you might want to take Grand Soulfire, just in case you see some magic, but I don't think it's as necessary as against, say, like Bretonnia. But yeah, you want to take those two spells, use him to buff up your front line. Jade Wizard's always a solid pick, and so we'll take him, and again, cut out all his spells except just Earthblood and Regrowth. Power Stone's not a bad idea. We'll keep him on foot to kind of keep with how my opponent's list was there. 3 greatswords is not too bad actually against Chaos in the front line, especially if you're buffing him up with like the Archlector, and I didn't catch it if my opponent was using the Reichland Runefang and the Standard Ground there in the front line. I assume he was to buff up those greatswords, but a couple of swordsmen just to help fill out numbers a little bit, like he had there. Demigryph Knights, and we're actually going to upgrade another one to the Royal Altar of Gryphites just because they cause fear and terror, you know, it's decent against Chaos. They're not super weak to terror. They have some good leadership units, but they have very few immune to psychology units, so the terror from the Royal Altar of Gryphites definitely can be useful, and since you don't have a Griffin or anything else to cause terror, you know, that's going to be your best option in that aspect. Silver Bullets and Handgunners, solid picks, although I might argue actually against bringing Silver Bullets just because Big Bird is such a hard counter. You'll still get good value from other shooting at other things, but it may be worth cheaping out and just going with more regular handgunners. Granted, it's going to be tougher to protect something like that, so maybe we'll forego that. And at this point, we actually have enough cost to do a number of different things. We could grab a couple of Empire Knights, 3 to be exact, just to give us some extra numbers and some extra shock cav power. Or if you don't want to micro that much cav, I understand, you know, you could always cut one, maybe grab another greatsword, maybe grab like a flagellant and just a reserve spearman or something to help counter, you know, and protect the backline. In that aspect, it may not actually hurt to just have, you know, a reserve of spearmen to help protect your backline against those Marauder Horsemen. You can even screen out with these spearmen and use them as throwing axe catchers, so that you can protect your Demigryph Knights a little bit better and not have them get axes thrown at them quite so much. So something like this I think could be pretty solid against Chaos. Now granted, I haven't tried this build specifically, so you know, take it with a grain of salt, but another option may be to take another character. All the Empire characters except for the Captain. The Captain's not amazing, but even in that matchup, like if my opponent had a flying captain, for example, that was constantly just harassing Big Bird and going back up in the air and diving him, because just for the sake of argument, we can see here that the captain with the Pegasus has an 85 charge bonus, doesn't have the most weapon strength, but he can charge down there and actually apply a pretty solid beating to Big Bird. But granted, he's going to get hard countered by things like Shaggoths and stuff like that, so it is a little bit of a risky pick. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it, but something like a Witch Hunter or a Warrior Priest, again, to help buff up your front line, or maybe like you do something like this, where let's go ahead and cut, what do we cut here? Maybe we cut some of these spearmen and we do something like this, where we take a Warrior Priest on a horse to support the Royal Altar of Gryphite specifically. We take the same 2 buffs on him, just the lesser versions, and go that way, use him to buff up the Royal Altar of Gryphites so that they win more decisively. Just some food for thought here. There's some different routes you can go. The Empire definitely has a lot of different variety, so there's different things that are viable, certainly. But that's kind of my food for thought there, and how I would fine-tune my opponent's build there. So hopefully, if you're watching this, Glooser, I'm not sure how you pronounce that username, but hopefully you found that useful, and hopefully the rest of you found it useful as well. And let me know in the comments down below as well, what kind of builds do you like to take, Empire versus Chaos? Have you been experimenting with the Faith stuff to buff up your greatswords and other things like that so they trade more effectively? Do you prefer more powder-focused builds? You know, let me know in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.